Hey, high school literacy leaders. This is DLC Foster Yankee, and I would like to welcome you to Curriculum Chats. This series of videos is intended for campus leaders, substitutes, special education teachers, really anyone going into the classroom to participate in or observe instruction who needs to know the lesson but doesn't have time to click around Odell and figure it out. My intention is to discuss these lessons through the lens of someone outside of the classroom and share with you some suggestions and look fors. In this video, I'll be discussing the first lesson in the first section of the Hamlet unit. Here are the goals, teaks, and ELPs for this lesson, courtesy of our curriculum. Some highlights are students using print or digital resources to clarify and validate understanding of multiple meanings of advanced vocabulary and guide to the study of literature. So some context clues and dictionary skills work using one of the texts they'll be using in this lesson. Students will also analyze context to draw conclusions about nuanced meaning in the same text. Finally, they will establish a purpose for reading assigned and self selected text in this unit. We have two texts students will be using for this lesson, including a copy of the play Hamlet. And as mentioned in the previous slide, students will read an excerpt on tragedy from A Guide to the Study of Literature. Lots of materials will be utilized as well, including several tools, the culminating task checklist and progress tracker, as well as the Hamlet archetypal lens note taking tool, unit text and vocabulary lists, in addition to the vocabulary and context tool and vocabulary journal. There are also two reference guides available for this lesson. Those are the annotating and note taking and literacy toolbox reference guides. All right, here is the lesson overview. We will learn about the unit's topic and central question by reviewing the unit overview. We will discuss the culminating task and determine what we need to know and do to succeed on the culminating task. We will be introduced to key features of the archetypal criticism lens, and we will read a brief introduction to the tragedy genre and its archetypes in preparation for reading the play Hamlet. We will use a range of strategies to determine the meaning of unknown words in the text. So they will do a lot of things in this lesson. Let's take a closer look at the 6 activities that make up lesson 1. In activity 1, the teacher begins by introducing the unit's central question: how many ways can the same text be read? Then students have a partner or small group discussion about the questions in the middle of the screen. After discussing, students write a response to the last question, which is, if you were to provide an answer to the central question today, what would it be, in their learning logs. They will return to this initial response in later lessons to examine how their understanding of the central question has evolved. For the second part of Activity 1, students are reading and annotating the culminating task checklist to determine what skills and knowledge they need to succeed on the culminating task. So if you're unfamiliar with the culminating task, students will choose one of 3 literary criticism texts written about Hamlet and write a well-developed multi-paragraph literary analysis essay that defends or challenges a claim from one of the literary criticisms. They will need to support their analysis using a variety of well selected evidence from Hamlet, as well as material from the unit. They will logically and sufficiently support their response with evidence from the play and the literary criticism, including direct quotations with parenthetical citations. They'll also apply correct and effective words, phrases, syntax, usage, and mechanics to clearly communicate their analysis, provide a works cited page with their final products, and also be sure to demonstrate a clear understanding of the themes in Hamlet, determine the central ideas and primary claim of the selected essay, evaluate the author's reasoning and their use of textual evidence, form a claim that defends or challenges a claim of the selected essay, and use textual evidence from Hamlet and the selected essay to support their claim. So, students are reviewing that task, and in small groups, they are discussing and responding to the questions on part one of their culminating task progress tracker. Afterwards, the group creates a checklist in their learning log or uses the culminating task progress checker to determine what they need to know and do to succeed on the culminating task. Then, for each knowledge and skill identified, they will self assess how prepared they are. So, the purpose of this activity is metacognition in students monitoring their own progress towards the unit goals. Some supports, I would expect to see the teacher circulating and asking some probing questions of those groups as they are discussing the culminating task. And the teacher may also want to conclude with a whole class discussion to ensure all students clearly understand the task and the expectations. For more engagement, just making sure that the progress tracker is utilized by students throughout the unit, and also utilizing that tool to confer with students throughout the unit on their progress. Activity two should be relatively quick. Students are looking at a list of texts that will be utilized throughout the unit. A display of the independent reading options would make a great addition to the classroom environment. So teachers could collaborate with the campus ILS on getting that set up. And that's pretty much all there is for activity two. In activity three, students are using the archetypal lens note-taking tool to record some notes on the archetypal lenses. There are about 5 bullet points that students are adding on this note catcher here, and that space is pretty small. So the teacher may want to have them write on the back of the tool or just provide them with a handout that includes the bullet points they'll be reviewing. This tool will guide students' work with the archetypal lens, and they will return to it throughout the unit. Some suggested supports might be an anchor chart that includes the bullet points the teacher is reviewing, as well as a definition of tragedy, since the archetypal lens requires students to have some base knowledge of the tragedy genre. It might also be beneficial to add images of movies or books that are considered tragedies and have students discuss which characteristics of the genre those texts have. For struggling writers, teachers may want to print the notes or create fill in the blank notes for them to fill in as they share with the class. It would also be beneficial to provide students with relevant examples of archetypes. The curriculum suggests using Harry Potter and or the Hunger Games for the hero's quest and hero mentor archetypes. The Lion King and the Wizard of Oz are hopefully still relevant examples of the hero's quest as well. To up the student engagement, the teacher might also ask students to provide examples of those different archetypes. In activity four, students are reading and annotating the first 3 paragraphs of the tragedy excerpt from A Guide to the Study of Literature. They use the question, what are the key features of the tragedy genre, to guide their reading and also annotate the text for unknown words. Suggested supports are to provide students with a system for annotating. There is a sample annotation key in the annotating and note taking reference guide that the teacher can use to model how to annotate the text. The teacher might also read the text aloud to the class, pausing at predetermined places to ask questions about points of confusion or prompt them to annotate. The teacher might also encourage English learners to annotate the text in their home language. For engagement, I would suggest giving students options for how they annotate, whether it be sticky notes, the Cornell method, or jotting in the margins of the text. And also making sure their annotations connect to the lesson's goals, which focus on determining the meaning of unknown words. For activity 5, students use the vocabulary journal tool, which they will maintain for the entire unit. The words they are working with are found on the vocabulary list here in the middle. If they can decipher the meaning of a word using the text, they add it to the vocabulary in context tool. Some of the words do not have enough context, such as inevitable in the tragic vision section of the article. Students will need to examine the guiding questions in the vocabulary in context tool to determine when and how to use context clues. For other words, they use morphology, a reference resource, or the teacher might provide the definition. Students add the words and definitions as well as the strategy used to determine meaning, though I don't see a space for that on their vocabulary journals. Suggested supports: don't restrict students to the words on the vocabulary list. As they were reading and annotating, every student highlighted different words. So they should be encouraged to add those words to their vocabulary journals in addition to the ones on the list. If necessary, the teacher should model how to use the vocabulary in context tool, since it is a tool students will revisit in later activities. For engagement, the teacher could have students work collaboratively to create a word wall that includes the terms, definitions, and visuals. Activity 6 is listed as a homework activity. Students are using the vocabulary and context tool to help them determine the meaning of the words and phrases listed on the screen. So here, just as they did in activity 5, they will write their answers in their vocabulary journal. For each word, they need to identify the vocabulary strategy, either context, morphology, or reference material, used to determine its meaning using the questions in the vocabulary in context tool as a guide. Finally, they will check their definitions using a dictionary, either printed or online. Because the pacing guide tasks teachers with completing multiple lessons in one day, this activity will most likely be completed in class. Sorry. And since the previous activity was akin to the I do portion of gradual release, this activity can be completed by students either with a partner or individually. For engagement, allow students to work in groups to write real life examples or create visuals for the words and add those to the classroom word wall. That's a wrap for this video. I welcome your feedback and look forward to hearing from you either on Twitter, via email, or in the comments. While you're here, don't forget to subscribe so you never have to worry about missing a video. Thanks for watching.